Welcome, guys. Welcome to the 6th installment, Microstakes Poker Study Group. And today we actually have someone who knows how to play poker.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a guy called Alex who messaged me last week. Was it last week or earlier this week? I can't really remember when it was.
Yeah, some days ago. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, just got to talking, and Alex kindly offered to give me a bit of coaching. Yeah, he's currently crushing NL50z, and I'm struggling a bit at NL10. So we're going to try and kind of solve that problem today. And Alex, like, just for people, more so for people on YouTube later when we upload this, just let us know, like, kind of where you came from in poker, like how long you've been playing for, how you got up to NL50. That.
Yeah, sure, man. So, like, the beginning of the story is pretty funny actually, because I discovered poker when I was in Vegas. Not
Nice.
kidding. Like, I was doing a trip in the US, and like, we were in Vegas only for one day, I think, or two. And we're hanging around there a bit and hanging out in the casinos. And I didn't play anything actually, but just by seeing the people there playing poker, I got interested. And like when I was younger at school back then, I played a little bit of online poker, so I remembered that. But I never played for money back then, only for play money.
Yeah.
So yeah, classic. And yeah, and then I actually in Vegas I started like googling and reading stuff, the Black Rain blog and all of this. Like, I think some of the guys who maybe now are watching got into poker the same way. Yeah, and so he talked about how to crush the microstakes and everything, and so I got interested. And when I came home, I started playing online a bit, and I played like from NL2 up. It's not like I skipped a stake. I played NL2 and NL5, and that went pretty quickly, went pretty good. And then I was like I was still studying at that time, so I didn't have like a lot of time to play, and that's why then I was actually stuck at NL10 for like ages. I don't know, maybe like nearly a year. I don't know.
Makes
I
me
mean, I
feel a
didn't
bit better
play.
about myself then.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't play super much, but still, like I was really stuck. I'm not gonna lie, and yeah, and then actually, like, it got a bit better before the whole Corona lockdown, and then during Corona, when I finally had like all the time that I needed, I said to myself, "Now I'm gonna take this more seriously," and I like played every day, all day more or less. Like, I studied a lot, so it was not only grinding, a lot of studying. And yeah, so I managed to move up from NL10 to NL50 pretty quickly, like in, I don't know, 3 months, something like that.
Nice.
And have playing like 3 or 4 months, yes, and have playing yeah, NL50 ever since. But yeah, because I have a full-time job right now, I'm not playing as much as I would like to. But yeah, NL50 is also going very well, so I'm pretty happy about that. And now I am rolled for NL100, and we will see how that goes. Yeah,
No fear.
that's it. Yeah, a bit scared, you know. But yeah, we'll definitely do that soon. Give it a shot.
Cool, man.
Yeah, that's
But
it.
yeah, it sounds good. Sounds like you're probably in a similar spot. Um, when you got up to NL10 as where I'm at the moment, where you're just a little bit yeah, you get kind of into that area where you're almost tunnel visioned, and you get stuck a little bit, and then
Definitely.
you just
Yeah.
need that extra kind of push over the line, whether that's more studying or having someone like yourself kindly offer to, review a database.
Yeah, sure, man.
So
I
it's
thought this could be fun.
so yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully guys watching can get a lot of value from it as well. So I'm happy to
so.
kick off with wherever you want to kind of start. Teach me,
Yeah,
Sensei.
yeah. Let's go. No, so I looked at your database. I mean, you sent me like 30,000 hands of party poker, fast forward, right? It was the fast format.
Yeah.
And some of Poker Stars, but I decided like to look at the party ones because the sample was bigger. And yeah, and so what I coached a few guys. I didn't do much coaching until now, but had some guys that asked me for help, and I coached them. So I have a kind of a routine right now, and the first thing I do is obviously looking at the main stats. Sometimes they can also already tell me something, right? And like the first, like okay, like I mean, the people love graphs, right?
Yeah.
so let's talk about the graph real quick. I mean, though I would suggest for everyone playing to not get married to the graph and not get mad at the graph or whatever. Like it's so easy to start hating this thing here.
Yeah.
Especially because a lot of players I think are like they think that NL10 or stuff, they need to have a winning red line and it never happens, and then they get depressed about it. And it was for me a bit like that. And I'm gonna tell you that right now at NL50 Zoom, my red line is still only like break even, slightly losing still. So that's no problem. The only thing obviously here when we are looking at this line is that the red line is a bit much declining, right?
Yeah.
A lot. That was the same for me back in the days when I was playing NL10. That's like the typical, like it's still pretty easy to make money with value bets at this limit. There are still a lot of fish, calling station and whatever. But obviously, like I think NL10 is like a bit of the breaking point where we need to start to have at least a somewhat decent red line. And so yeah, looking here, that's obviously what's killing a bit, what's killing your profits right now. And so our objective should be to get this not winning, not break even, but like slightly declining, like something like slightly declining. And yeah, obviously we now need to find out where this could come from. And the first thing I noted is that your gap between VPIP and PFR is still pretty wide. It's like 7, right? Like nearly 7. You have 25.9 and 19.2. So yeah, and that's usually a sign that you are cold calling a bit too much. Like cold calling obviously means when early position or middle position or whatever is opening and we are not in the blinds, we are not the big blind, we are like on the button or on the cutoff, and we call. And that's basically the problem with that strategy. Like I think the whole professional poker world right now agrees that the best strategy is to simply not do that. Because the problem is the rake, right? At NL10, even at NL25, even at NL50, even at NL100, the rake is still pretty high. And every time we go to the flop, we pay rake. And that's why playing a 3-bet or fold strategy in position is so strong. And yeah, and the next problem obviously is that you're going to get squeezed sometimes. At NL10, maybe not super much, but when you move up, it's going to happen more and more. So basically, the strategy I would advise is like to not like my general strategy would be to not have a cold calling range in position at all. So I would always play 3-bet or fold. Obviously, this takes some practice. That would take an entire other coaching session to talk about 3-bet pots and whatever. But like to begin with, like you should start to apply a 3-bet or fold strategy. Like Google it, start studying it, and then you can apply it. And the only time I would have a cold calling range in position, and honestly only on the button, like I wouldn't do it on in the cutoff because I can still get squeezed from in position from the button, and that feels super bad. So yeah, only on the button and only if there is a big fish in the blinds, right? If there is a big fish sitting in the big blind, obviously we want to play a pot with him, and we don't want to scare him away by 3-betting. So we simply flat, and then maybe he comes along, and then we play in position against the other two guys because we're on the button, and the fish is in the pot. So that's nice. Does this make sense, more or less, or?
Yeah, yeah. I was only going to ask what kind of hands would we be looking to flat? 'Cause obviously there's certain hands where we'd always be 3-betting or always folding, but what hands would you say would be in that grey area of flatting on the button? You know, given the right conditions.
Yeah. So like again, I would probably only flat in the button if there is a fish in the blinds. But obviously you could, like only in the button, but in the button you could flat some hands even in other scenarios. And obviously the hands you want to play in position and that maybe are gonna go multi-way need to have good implied odds, right? So it should be a very small range and consist mainly of pocket pairs, like stuff to flat. Nice stuff to flat obviously is I don't know, pocket 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, because these hands obviously don't like to get 4-bet, so they are pretty heavy when they just flat. And some very good suited connectors like 8-9 suited, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's it mainly. Like I would avoid it at all costs, honestly, because 3-betting is just such a strong strategy, because when your opponent folds, you get the pot without paying rake, and that's huge. And if he calls, you have initiative and everything. So but if there is a fish in the blind, or if the opener is super tight and you're afraid of 3-betting a hand like pocket 9s, you can obviously call it sometimes. But I would do that only in the button. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense, man. It's one of those things that I think everyone hears about a lot, which is, you know, try to 3-bet more often and things like that. But I know I'm certainly guilty of it sometimes, where it's very easy to just take the easy option, press the call button for 25 cents or 30 cents or whatever, and just say, oh, I just want to see the flop. I think that's a trap that a lot of people fall into, myself included, clearly.
yeah, I did that too all the time. It's exactly that, right? You're a bit afraid of 3-betting, and it's like this fear goes away once you study the spots a bit. Once you obviously have to study 3-bet pots post flop a bit. You have to feel comfortable with playing these pots that are already pretty big, and not over bluff, not under bluff, and whatever. That obviously takes some study time. But like I think there is no way out of NL10, NL25, because those stakes are basically rake traps, right? And we need to avoid the rake at all costs. So I don't think you can beat these stakes for good without applying this strategy, right? Yeah. So that's awesome. Like you can see here. Where is it? Wait a second. No, it doesn't show here. Where have I put this? There should be a stat that is called cold call. Yeah, here, like cold call, your general cold call is 15. Like yesterday I checked mine, it was something like 8 or 7, because obviously it counts also the big blind. In the big blind, obviously we have to cold call, right? There is no way around it. So yeah, if you lower that to 10 or something, this should already like earn you 1 or 2 BB100, and that's pretty huge. So definitely something I would advise to do. Okay, and the next thing, like some general things, like your check raise is maybe a bit low. I don't know why it shows here 7. I think here it shows 10. Sometimes these stats are a bit confusing. Wait a second. Where is yeah, it's this one here. It's a 10. Like check raising is super important. Should go up a bit, but I think it's nothing tragic. So like I won't talk about it now for a long time or anything. Just quickly, just would like to quickly say it. Check raising should go up a bit, and And maybe you're playing a bit tight in some spots, like here, big blind fold to small blind steal and big blind fold to button steal is slightly too high. To small blind steal should be something like 45, and this should be something like 50. This one can be even a bit lower. So again, this is nothing tragic. Just try to maybe call a bit more in the big blind, right? Defend a bit more. Because I think in the Zoom pools there are some quite a few racks that are opening really wide because they want to abuse the Zoom population who is overfolding in the blinds. So yeah, to counter that, obviously we should call a bit more here, but again, nothing tragic. And yeah, like
with the sorry, just to come back a touch to you know, check raising on the flop. I think my issue with that is I sometimes almost don't necessarily know the right kind of circumstances. I guess it's the kind of thing that if I've got, say, if I flop, say, bottom set on a board that's good for, say, I don't know, the cutoffs open raising range, then I'll come in for a check raise. Or if I've got a combo draw like flush draw and a straight draw or something like that. But beyond that, I'm always a bit kind of unsure as to whether something is a check raising hand or a check calling hand. Yeah, I just wonder if you can kind of just give a little bit more on that in terms of what hands we're kind of looking to check raise on the flop.
Sure, man. So in general, like that's probably one of the biggest leaks of microstakes players is that they are not check raising enough in the big blind. Like big blind versus button is the spot that happens the most, right? And that's why we need to have a very good strategy there, or we will bleed red line money basically. And yeah, and one very important factor is to have a good check raising range. And like what most of the at least Zoom NL10 Zoom players do right now, I think at least it was like this when I played, is like most of them like know that on a lot of boards they should range bet for a small sizing, right? They bet 1/3 of the pot, and basically that strategy is super strong because like NL10 population is not check raising enough. And that's something I don't know if like like my plan was to talk about this a bit more in depth later. Maybe I should come back to this a bit later. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or maybe I will lose like maybe it is. Yeah, it is maybe it is better if we talk like about the pre-flop and then go to post-flop, because check raising is actually something I wanted to talk about because it's something that like most of the players are doing wrong. So I have something prepared for that in a solver. Yeah, actually, people are gonna hate me for that.
No, people on this stream love a solver.
The
amount of times,
I don't know, man.
The amount of times I see the word Pio in the chat when I'm talking about a spot or whatever. Pio wouldn't do this, or Pio would do this.
Okay, nice. That's good. Okay, so yeah, let's move on quickly here. And I don't know. Are there like some questions already? I can't see the chat, so I don't know.
Yeah. Like... So when we were talking about cold calling earlier, 84 Poison has asked whether you'd put king queen off, king queen suited in the cold calling range. I would guess those would be 3-bets, would they not? Position.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I would again always 3-bet them unless there is a fish in the blinds. Like king queen suited is pretty much always a 3-bet against, no matter the open, right? Even against early position open, we can 3-bet king queen suited. It's a super strong hand. And with king queen off, we need to be a bit more careful. We can 3-bet that one against cutoff open. I wouldn't 3-bet it against MP open unless he's like super overfolding against 3-bets. But like that, the important thing here is that doesn't mean that we should then say, okay, king queen off is too weak to 3-bet. Let's just cold call it, right? Like king queen off is a super bad hand to cold call because it doesn't have a lot of implied odds, right? It isn't suited. So if it hits top pair, it is often dominated by the early position. Like let's say early position open, we cold call in the button king queen off, and the flop comes, I don't know, king six deuce, like and early position starts betting, and he bets for three streets. Like what the fuck do we do now? Like that's the spots you put yourself into if you cold call too much, because he's wrapping ace king there all the time, and then you have to start guessing, or maybe look into his stats and say, okay, this guy is aggressive or whatever. We should avoid that scenario all the way. We should, against early position, we simply fold that hand, right? Even if there is a fish in the blinds, it doesn't have much implied odds. It only puts us into bad spots. If we call, we pay rake, so it sucks. King queen suited, on the other hand, should always be 3-bet. And if you don't feel comfortable with 3-betting super wide, that's a hand you could flat on the button. I would flat it in other positions, but on the button you could, if you want to avoid, if you're a bit scared, of playing 3-bet pots, you could flat that hand because at least it has implied odds, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope this makes sense, like as an
answer.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So essentially, it's just, it kind of comes down to, in a way, how good is your post flop playability, and how well is your hand going to stand up to a lot of pressure from like an early position raiser.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of what I'm taking from that. Yeah,
exactly. And there should always be this voice in your head that's saying, don't pay rake unnecessarily, right? It's not in a spot where we're going to be making lots of money when we flat king queen off against early position, and we are going to pay the rake. So overall, it's going to be a minus EV play.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Anything else, or should I proceed?
Yeah, you can proceed. We just got Andy Watson, who's a regular on the stream, saying he believes that solvers are almost irrelevant to the microstakes, just because the opposition is so far outside of like what is optimal. But he's happy to have that idea kicked completely to pieces.
Nice,
so let's
nice,
kick it to pieces then.
I will kick it to pieces. Not entirely. I would kick it to pieces partly. Right.
Yeah.
I won't say like solvers are an absolute must, but they have some value, definitely.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So next step obviously is to look into win rate by position, and to look a bit what you're doing by position. And the problem here is 35,000 hands is a very small sample, so this is not very reliable. Some stats are definitely a bit off here, but it still can give us a rough idea, right?
Cool.
And so what I can see from here is like most of it is pretty fine. Button win rate is a bit low, but I think that can be subject to variance, because like in my experience, most of NL10 players like are playing the button pretty fine. I think I watched some of your hands. I don't think like button is a huge problem or anything. It's just pretty. It's a position that it's pretty easy to play right. Yeah. And out of position is always harder. So that's what I like to look into. And here, like again, this could be variance, obviously, but especially small blind looks a bit bad. Like in my opinion, big blind is very, very hard to play. Small blind, we could actually it's again, it's nothing terrible, but here I think there is some room for improvement. And yeah, and here is something that I found that jumped at me pretty much. And that is the c-bet stats here, right? Here we have the c-betting numbers, and yeah, here we can see small blind, right? So in the first row here we have small blind, and basically your c-betting, we need to apply a filter here, just a second, because we don't want, like I would like to talk only about single raised pots right now. Wait, where is this? Here, I think. Yeah. Let's leave 3-bet pots out of the way for now. And so like in single raised pots, when you are in the small blind and you open and the big blind calls, right? Yeah. You are c-betting 80% of the time. And this is pretty sick. this number is quite a bit too high, right?
Yeah.
And c-betting is something that happens all the time, so I think it's very important for your win rate. And I think there are quite a lot of misunderstandings regarding c-betting from Microstakes players. Like what you will hear a lot of the time is you need to exploit those players at these stakes, right? They are weak, and they what you need to do is to be very aggressive, and you need to c-bet a lot, and that's kind of true, but I think you have to like what players don't do is they don't make enough difference between being out of position and in position, right? It is completely a different scenario if you open from the button, the big blind calls, and then you c-bet a lot, right? That's what we see a lot nowadays, that like when you're in the button in position and then on the flop, the big blind checks to you, you can c-bet for a small sizing pretty wide. Like on a lot of boards, you can c-bet your entire range for a small sizing, right? And that's a strategy that a lot of players are applying. And I think there it is totally fine to be exploitative and to do that pretty wide. Like to do it also on some boards where maybe at higher stakes, like a professional poker player would say, no, I can't c-bet on this board because that's too risky. The board is too connected or whatever. I mean, there are definitely some boards that are too connected for c-betting our entire range for a small sizing. But there are a lot of boards where we can get away with it. And why is that? And that's now where I'm gonna like come to the whole check raising discussion. And that's where I'm actually gonna open a solver. So I hope, like you tell me, I hope this is like visible now.
Yeah. I'm loving the tiger.
The tiger is cool, right? I love
it's a cool tiger.
Yeah, man. So can you see the screen of the solver right now of GTO Plus?
Can you not right now.
Okay, that happened a few times. So I think I have to, like, if I stop the screen sharing now and start it again, is that gonna cause some problems?
No, it shouldn't do. I'll just be capturing your name, I think, on Zoom.
Okay. So I'm gonna do that real quick because that solved the issue the last times.
Cool.
So I'm gonna stop it, and then I'm gonna.
In case any of you guys have just joined and you want to know who's doing the coaching here, there you go. There was the name right there. You missed it.
Can you see it now?
Yes, I can see it now. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So this here is a scenario I ran through the solver, and it is like this board here, 7-7-3, a pretty boring board, right? Pretty dry.
Yeah.
And this is the ranges I gave here is button versus big blind. So big blind doesn't have all the strong hands because he's 3-betting them, obviously, pre-flop.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are the ranges. And basically where we start is here, obviously big blind checks, right? And then what the solver suggests to do is to bet small with 76% of our range. Obviously, that's a bit complicated, and we are humans. We're not going to do that. So what most of the regs are doing these days on a board this dry, they are simply betting their whole range for a small sizing for 1/3, right? And so that's like that. What we would do in this spot. So let's say we bet our entire range here. Now this is how the big blind should react to us. Like if we bet the entire range, our entire range, he should react even more aggressively. But I was too tired, too lazy to adjust everything. so it stays like it. But it should like you should get the idea by looking at this. So basically, for those not familiar with solvers, here we can see the actions, right? And basically, what the solver suggests is to check raise. The big blind should check raise 24.5% of the time.
Oh, it's a lot
And
higher than I'd expect, actually.
yeah, and that's where like the whole microstakes population, me included, like I'm still studying this spot. I'm not doing it enough. It's like sometimes like some of these bluff, like some of the hands he's raising feel super unnatural to raise. And like now obviously we're looking at a solver, right?
Yeah.
And obviously like maybe some guys viewing the stream right now are gonna say, who cares about this solution? This is balanced play. I don't care about balanced play. I just want to exploit my opponents. So the problem here though is that the act, like how did we got here, right? It's not like Button had any chance to make a mistake until now. He basically range bets on this board. So this means he bets with his entire range, and so there's no mistake he can make, right? He has no choice to make. The only thing he does is he sees this board and think, okay, this is dry, I'm gonna range bet.
Yeah.
So how can we exploit that? We can't exploit that basically because he did everything right until now, and it was pretty easy to do everything right. And that's why range betting is such a strong strategy, because it doesn't require you to use your brain very much. It's just like just identify the few flops where you can't do it, and on all the other flops you simply do it. And it is such a strong strategy because the big blind now needs to react in this way, because like at this point we can't exploit our opponent. The only thing we can do at this point is, I mean, we can maybe exploit him by playing even a bit more aggressively, but we should play at least this aggressively, right, to play optimal here. And nobody's gonna do that. Like if you look at this here, like he does stuff like he raises stuff like 3-4 suited, and I don't know, 6-3 suited. Like these hands feel pretty weak, right? But why is he doing this? He's doing this because if he doesn't check raise all of these hands, especially these weak pairs, right, the 3x we have, he's letting the button realize his whole equity. Let's say we are the button player and we have a hand like, I don't know, 9-10 offsuit, right? And the big blind has a hand like 3-4 suited. Now, if we just call, if we are the big blind player and we just call, the button player then on the turn can if he has 9-10 suited, let's say on the turn he decides, okay, I don't want to bluff, whatever turn it is, and then he checks behind, and then he sees the river card. So basically the button, and with the small bet at the beginning, he ensures that he sees all of the 5 cards. So he realizes his whole equity. And when he has 9-10 offsuit against our 3-4 suited, he has 2 overcards. I mean, it's a super bad hand, 9-10 offsuit, but he still has some equity against us because he has 2 overcards, and that means he has 6 outs.
And the backdoor straight draw as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that means that if we don't check raise aggressively enough, we let him realize his whole equity. Like these 6 outs, he's gonna realize them, right? If there comes a 9 on the turn, he is ahead now, and we can't do anything about it, because we obviously won't donk the turn, right? We just check to him on the turn, and then he can check behind, so he can even see the river, and maybe the river is a 9, right?
Yeah.
But if we check raise a hand like 3-4 suited here, we are denying him this equity, and because he will fold a hand like 9-10 suited, 9-10 offsuit or suited or whatever. Like we are not trying to bluff him out of the pot or something. We are just trying to protect our hand against the weak holdings, his weak holdings that have a bit of equity but not enough to continue, right?
Cool. Yeah.
I don't know if this is too complicated, if this makes sense, but that's basically why c-betting a lot when you're in the button for the small sizing is good, because the big blind will make a lot of mistakes. He will not play like this, so we will over realize our equity when we are on the button. And that's why this whole thing of c-bet a lot at the micros is totally true, but when you're in position, right? And the problem is, like, I looked at your database, and that you, for example, and I think a lot of players are misapplying that, and they think like they don't make any difference. And like when they are out of this position, they are basically doing the same thing, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's about check raising. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's one of those things that I've looked at it before, you know, in theory, and gone, oh yeah, you know, that makes perfect sense. And then when it comes to like putting it into practice, I just don't do it. And like as you said, like most other kind of players at these stakes, and it makes perfect sense. You know, it's that I think it's the issue of the monsters under the bed when you're check raising with your 4-3, 5-3, 6-4, 7-4, stuff like that. Or maybe not 7-4, but it's that thing of like, oh, but if I check raise, they're just always going to have aces, or they're always going to have 7, and then I'm just going to get owned. But it's I think that's just one of those bad habits that we, as particularly as microstakes players, kind of fall into, where we just always expect the opponent to have it, or always expect them to call the check raise with you know, with ace high, and then get there on the turn or something like that. But it's not the case, because you do get them to fold out their 10 highs, jack highs, queen highs,
Exactly.
and king highs. Really, they may call with an ace high, but not that often.
Yeah, that's exactly that. I mean, you want to deny them their equity. Like, you don't want to give them the possibility to see all the 5 cards, even with their crappy hands, right? Because the important thing here is that they are betting small for 1/3, and that usually means, like, most of the players, for them this means they bet 1/3 with their entire range, right? And there is so much crap in there that we need to fold out. I mean, it's crap, but that has still equity against us, and that's like, if it was only crap, we would be happy to keep it in there, but it has some equity against us. So we want to fold it out, because that's important. Obviously, if your opponent is betting 3/4 spot, that usually means he plays a polarized strategy, right? He chooses some hands to do this with, and I don't think he does it with all of his hands. Like, most likely he checks behind with some. Most likely he's still very unbalanced and everything, but probably he checks behind some crappy hands, and then it is fine, right, to just call a lot of our hands. But if he bets his whole range, we just need to play aggressively against that. And obviously not only with value hands, but also with bluffs. Like you can see here, a lot of these suited hands. And if I would put in here that we bet our 100% of our range, he would do it even more. He would do it like 30% or something. Like, he starts to raise all these suited hands, stuff like 4-6 suited that has backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, and all this stuff. And there will be some bluffs that feel pretty unnatural. This requires some study, obviously. Like even I'm not. I don't think I'm raising ace-4 off enough here, for example.
No.
And obviously, you don't have to copy paste this strategy, right? You always, when using a solver, the idea is not to copy paste strategies. The idea is to realize, oh my God, like Jesus Christ, I'm doing it totally wrong here, right? I need to check raise more. And then obviously you can deviate from this and say, okay, I don't like ace-4 off here, and I'm not gonna mix frequencies and whatever. I'm simply check raising these suited hands, like some of these always, and never these offsuit aces or whatever. Like, that's totally fine. But just realize that the base concept behind it, right? And that's why solvers are useful. Obviously, I don't recommend like NL10 players like sitting every day with the solver and, I don't know, solving 4-bet pots out of position or whatever. But the most common spots, it makes sense to put them into a solver and to have a look, right? What is the perfect base strategy? And then obviously you have to always think, how will my opponents react to this? Obviously, your opponents will overfold to a check raise probably. That's why on the turn we won't play like the solver. We will play a bit more carefully and stuff like that. So you have to deviate, but it's nice to have a look at the base strategy, basically.
Yeah, it's good, man. It's there's quite a few kind of comments coming up in the chat here where people are just saying kind of like, so Andy Watson's basically said, so essentially in terms of implementing this kind of strategy, we should be check raising essentially our weak made hands, so our 3x and stuff like that, when facing a small bet from a wide range on a dry board, essentially to protect against against the hands that we discussed earlier, the 10 highs, jack highs, queen highs, and stuff like that. Check raising pretty much all the 7x from what I can tell as well.
Yes, yes, yeah.
I'm assuming that's for value against hands that are always calling over pairs, aces, kings, queens, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the next problem. Like if you're not check raising enough, right? Let's say he has a hand like pocket, I don't know, pocket nines or something like that, and we are not check raising. Like as you can see, he is check raising nearly all of his 7x, right?
Yeah.
And that's because that's our growth, right? Because if we don't check raise now, he can then comfortably check behind on the turn with his medium strength hands, and then we have only one street left to bet, and that's the river, and the pot is still very small. So basically, we had trips and we did get nothing out of it, right? So. Yeah. That's obviously the strategy here. Like the nutted hands need to be check raised like pretty much always. Like against the more aggressive, good opponents, obviously you should trap sometimes so they can't totally abuse you and always triple barrel bluff and whatever. But that doesn't happen much at NL10, right? So basically, with our real strong hands, we should always fast play them, right? Check raise, roll the pot. And yeah, especially like the ones like, for example, here pocket threes, as you can see, is full frequency check raise, because we're not even blocking the 7x. So maybe he has a 7 and we get, like if he has a 7 here, right, we want to check raise and we want to bet big and bet big again and stack him basically, like get his whole stack. So fast play the nutted hands, bluff with a lot of suited hands. Like obviously, like it's not like we want to blindly raise for protection here. So for example, a hand like Jack 3 suited here, in my opinion, is not such a good check raise, because obviously if you want to check raise a value hand here, we want to always also be ahead sometimes, right? When he calls us, and if we check raise a hand like ace 3 off, he can call us with king 3 suited, queen 3 suited, jack 3 suited. So there are still quite a bit of hands we are dominating. And then another factor we should always consider is additional equity for the next streets, right? So obviously here a nice hand to, like when he chooses bluffs, for example, let's have a look here. He raises something like Jack, this is a typical example, like Jack 8 suited, right? Yeah. He's raising that here as a bluff, and he's obviously choosing the ones with additional equity. So he's folding out Jack 8 suited of diamonds, because that has no additional
the backdoor flush, right?
Exactly. And why is that? Because if we check raise Jack 8 of hearts here, it's not like we are then barreling blindly on the turn and over bluffing or whatever. We are then like getting quite some folds. But if our opponent calls, we obviously have to be cautiously, right? Because they are going to overfold a bit, so they're going to be pretty strong if they call. But with a hand like Jack 8 of hearts, our strategy is pretty easy, because on every turn it is not a heart or not a jack or whatever, we're gonna simply give up, right? That's totally fine, because our check raise on the flop is already gonna get quite some folds. But obviously on a heart, we are gonna continue to apply pressure, because we have a flush draw now. And that's the whole point of check raising the backdoor flush draw on the flop, right? Because these hands can apply additional pressure on some turns and are not totally fucked if our opponent calls, basically, the check raise.
So yeah, I mean that all makes sense. That kind of ties into a question that's just been asked in the chat by Cool Hand Matt. Essentially saying, like, when we check raise, our weak value hands, your 4-3 suited, 5-3 suited, how do we then approach the turn? And I think it's the same with, as you said, with the Jack 8 suited where we've got backdoor equity. I would assume it would be a case of like, if you check raise, let's say 4-3 suited on the flop, and the turn comes a 9. I'm assuming we would barrel a hand like a card like a 9, because they're going to be folding out their 10-9, Jack-9, Queen-9, King-9, Ace-9 and stuff like that. But if the turn comes like an ace or even maybe a king, then maybe we slow down, because it's more likely they've got, they might have called us with an ace high that has now got there on the turn or something like that. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's definitely a very good thought process. Yeah, so basically it depends a lot on the turn card, obviously. And then, I mean, it gets a bit more complicated, right? There you can apply a lot of strategies. Like what I'm doing right now is that on certain turns, I'm betting small. I mean, this gets a bit fancy. Like if, for example, here the turn is, let's say, a 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I have 3-4 suited. My 3 could still be good, right? It could be that he has called my check raise with king queen off, or king queen. Let's say king queen suited with backdoor equity, right? With backdoor flush draw, he may call that, and then maybe on the low turn card, I'm still ahead, right?
Yeah.
And maybe his backdoor flush draw didn't convert into a flush draw. Actually, that will happen quite often. So basically, he then will give up, and the small sizing will be enough, right? But that's maybe a bit fancy. Like on most turns, like on the higher ones, as you said, we are obviously a bit concerned, because he will call our check raise with quite a bit of overcards. So there we are giving up quite often, like we are check folding basically, and that's fine, because we already protected our equity on the flop, and we already got a lot of folds there. Only because he calls us this time doesn't mean he calls us like always, right? And obviously, if we have 3-4 of hearts, for example, and the turn is a queen of hearts, like on these high turns, we should then polarize a lot. Like basically, what we need to do then is to bet only our really strong hands and only some bluffs, right? Because our opponent is quite a bit ahead now. And so what we could do, if a hand like 3-4 of hearts, we could turn it into a bluff, for example. If the turn is a king of hearts, we have a flush draw and a weak pair. We could either check call. Obviously, we are never check fold. Sometimes we could also decide, now we turn this into a bluff and bet very big, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we have options. It's not like we are out of options on the turn, basically.
Yeah. But if it's like, so using that same example, then if you've got 3-4 of hearts, and the turn is, say, the queen of diamonds, then I'm guessing we'd be looking more along the lines of check fold as opposed to check call or bet, because we haven't picked up any additional equity to kind of help us out of a sticky situation if our opponent has picked something up, or if they're just ahead anyway.
Yes, exactly that. Especially because I think like NL10 players especially will overfold a bit on the flop, because they are not facing many check raises in those spots, because a lot of players are not doing it, so they are not so used to it, so they will give it a lot of credit. And there will be some sticky players, obviously, but I think like the population in general is gonna overfold a bit. So that's why we need to slow down a bit on the turn, and there is no shame in check folding sometimes, right? Cool. Exactly. Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Mumble Chum's just asked in the chat, would we be doing this against only thinking opponents, or the whole population, and like excluding the fish? I'm pretty confident in saying here this would be essentially a population exploit. I think it's the kind of thing that will work against both fish and thinking opponents, let's say. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think like that definitely, but I think we have to like there are different types of fish, right? like when I play against a fish, it is super important. Like if you have one, to look into your HUD, right, and to find out what, because these players will be so unbalanced that it's like from their action, it is pretty easy to tell what they are doing, right? So
Yeah.
so a fish will probably not even bet small with his entire range. He will most likely not do that, right? Like I can guarantee 95% that he will just smash buttons on the flop. So he will sometimes bet big with a strong hand. Like he will not bet small in general, I think. And that's where our whole strategy already changes a bit. And where then like only calling makes more sense, but it depends like a super lot against the fish. Like if he's like a super passive fish and he bets big on a board like this, I'm pretty concerned, and I'm not sure. I'm not gonna raise this borderline value hands here. I'm gonna raise only a stronger range. And if he's on the other hand like a maniac, one of these crazy guys that bets big, like with nearly his entire range and stuff like that, we obviously can still apply a similar strategy. But it depends a lot. Like fish is always a different chapter. But like when you're playing Zoom, and you will face a lot of regulars, a lot of very nitty players, and a lot of fish that are not like whales or something like that, but that are like kind of reg fish or something like that, right? They are still playing maybe Zoom every day, but they're playing something like VPIP 25 and PFR 10 or something. Like against them, it will work too, right? They are like not so far from a regular at the end of the day.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense there.
Okay, cool.
I'm comfortable that I can go into rye boards like this with a much clearer kind of idea of what I should be check raising.
Yeah. Like obviously this has to be studied a bit, but it should give a nice starting idea. Like again, I'm probably not check raising this white yet, but like should be our objective to get somewhere here, right?
Yeah. And then kind of take the strategy and then kind of simplify it. So instead of check raising, specific ace X offsuit and calling the others, it's like let's say we call all of the ace X offsuits and call all the suited aces, and then those other hands where it's like 7-5 suited, I think there where it's got some check raise, some check call. You just simplify that by just check raising it all the time.
Exactly. I would never mix frequencies. I would always like do it with all of them, or not do it at all. And I mean, this can be pretty fun. I mean, if you have a Sora, GTO Plus is only 70 bucks or something like that, so it's not that expensive. I mean, don't buy it, everyone, now. I'm not saying that, but like if you have the luxury to have one, obviously you can go here and you can open like a text file or whatever and start like writing it down, right? On this board, my strategy is gonna be check raise this hand, blah blah blah, check call these hands, more or less, and that's that's what you can call range building, and that in my opinion is a lot of fun, and it's like one of the for me that is a lot of fun, and it is a lot of fun then in game when you have a super solid strategy and you know exactly what to do here because you wrote it all down, and obviously this is very time consuming, but like if you're passionate about it, this can be a lot of fun, definitely.
Yeah, this sounds good to me.
Yeah. And so this all to say that now that's why like I started this whole topic because I wanted to show you why like us the in position player, not only the button, also when we are in the cutoff, MP or whatever, and the big blind calls us, why it is such a good strategy to bet for a very small sizing with our entire range on a lot of boards, right? We can be pretty exploitative, pretty aggressively, and overdo it. Like on some boards it might be borderline, let's say, I don't know, 9-7 deuce or something with a flush draw. Against a very good opponent, we should polarize there, but against population, NL10 population, we can probably say, I don't care, I also range bet here. And it's such an effective strategy because our opponents will make so many mistakes, right? They will never do something like this. And so they will lose a lot of their equity, and we will have an easy life by checking behind a lot of turns and ensuring we see all five of the cards. And yeah. And on the other hand, there is the out of position situation, right? If we get back here, can you see the hold'em manager?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, perfect. Like if you can see like here what you did. Where is it? Where is the c-bet?
C-bet 80, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Here it is. Yeah, like this number here, the 81. Like this, on the other hand, is very problematic because when we are like, I think those are the most important spots because they happen all the time, right? Big blind versus button and big blind versus small blind. And so if we are now in a small blind and in a single raised pot, so the big blind called us and we are on the flop, now it is a bad idea to say, okay, I play super exploitatively here. I keep things easy. I just c-bet like nearly all the time with a small sizing or with a slightly bigger sizing or whatever, because that's going to put us in a lot of trouble. Why is that? Because being out of position, we don't have this luxury to say, okay, I can check behind the turn and see all of the 5 cards. I can realize my whole equity. Basically, we are not in control of the size of the pot, right? Yeah. Like in the scenario we talked about, it was so nice because the big blind, unless he check raises very aggressively, and that's something he won't do, we are in control of the size of the pot because he just calls on the flop, and then on the turn we can decide, do I fire another bet, do I grow the pot, or do I just check behind and keep the pot small? Now, when we are out of position and when we c-bet the flop and our opponent calls and we get to the turn, and if we just check there, now our opponent has full control, right? He can say, okay, now I have a good hand, I'm gonna bet big now. And he can say, like, even if we bet, like, let's say we bet the flop and we bet the turn, he can say, like, we're giving him another opportunity to raise, right? He has all the tools he wants to grow the pot. Yeah. And that's why we need to be much more careful, because obviously in our range, there will not only be very strong hands and very strong bluffs, but there will also be a lot of medium strength hands, right? And I have some examples here from your database that are some hands that I tagged to have a look at. And let's see what, like, a good example. Wait a second. Yeah, like this would be a good example. I mean, I don't remember what you did here, but this is just for the purpose, like, yeah. So this is a typical board that is super wet, right? Yeah. We would also like not range bet this board when we're in position, but especially when we're out of position, small blind versus big blind, we need to be super careful here. And I think if I remember correctly, where can I? Okay, I can show your hand here. Yeah, you have ace 10 off here, right? And you could say, well, I have top pair here, right? Time to bet. The problem when being out of position, like it's even a bit problematic in position, honestly. Like I would like to have an example that is a bit less extreme, maybe. Yeah, let's say this hand here, maybe. This is better. It's a bit less extreme. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have like, yeah, we open. Like in general, I would open for 3 big blinds from the small blind, but that's another topic. Okay,
I have started doing that more recently, actually, since the last study session where we were talking a lot about that, and I've started getting more folds from the big blind, ironically, as well.
yeah, it's definitely like, yeah, it's like let's keep it here, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this flop is a typical example. It is, I mean, it's kind of wet, right? It's not super wet, but kind of like even if we were in position, we should be a bit careful. But I think against NL10 population, we maybe could get away with range betting this board, because the board is paired, and so he will miss quite a bit. But the problem is when we're out of position, we need to be more careful, right? Because if we like in this with this hand, for example, if we bet here and get called, like there will be so many turns where when we then check, our opponent can ensure to grow the pot, right? And there will be a lot of turns where it will get dicey, right? On every club it will get dicey, on every 8, on every 5, on every 9. Like those cards will make the board more connected. And that's why, like from the beginning of the hand, like from this point, we should have this mindset to say, okay, like this is a medium strength hand, right? Because I have a pair, yes, but I don't have any backdoor equity. It's not like I have king 6 of diamonds, of spades here. So I don't have much equity. I just have this pair, right? And the problem is that like our thought from the beginning should be, I want to keep the pot small, right? I don't have this tool here to check behind the turn. So from the beginning, I would like with a medium strength hand to keep it quite small. So that's why check calling becomes a much better option here, right? And like on a board like this, we can't range bet, and that basically means like from the flop on, already on the flop, we need to polarize, and that means we have to divide our strategy like in different how could you say, like in different parts, right?
Yeah. So like super weak hands that have absolutely no chance of kind of getting there with anything. So you either want to make your opponent fold now, and then give up from there, and then hands that have a lot of equity, like 8, 9 of clubs, or if you've got a 7 or something like that. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah,
exactly. Like I would like to maybe try to visualize this. I think this is pretty like this is pretty like a bit more complex, right? And I think it is nice to get an overview here, basically.
Yeah.
So what we want to do here is we want to have a betting range, obviously, right?
Yeah.
We want to have a check raising range. Yeah. Then we want to have a check calling range, and then we want to have a check folding range, right?
Yeah.
And that's why these spots obviously are more complicated. We can't just bet our entire range easy peasy. We actually need to have a solid strategy. And yeah, and by the way, maybe to avoid now that maybe some guys in the chat will say, well, why not play exploitative here? Why do we even need to care about balance here? Like this is so different than the spot we talked before, because here it is like if we range bet here, for example, for a small sizing, it is not like in the example before, where it is super easy for our opponent to make mistakes. Here it is actually super easy for our opponent to play right?
Yeah.
Because he can simply float us with a lot of stuff, like every overcard, everything that has a tiny bit of equity, he just calls, right? And then because we range bet, we get to the turn with our range that is way too wide, and that means we need to check a lot. We need to check a lot. There are a lot of hands in our range we can't continue betting with. And so our opponent has an easy life, because he that's a scenario that happens a lot of at Microstakes, that someone bets flop, and then the opponent floats, and then the turn comes, and then the aggressor checks, And then the opponent knows, okay, this is the typical scenario that happens all the time. This guy is giving up now, right?
Yeah.
Because he knows most of his opponents are not protecting their checking range enough on the turn. I mean, they can't actually, because they got there with a range that is way too wide. And so he has an easy life. He's gonna just stab with pretty much everything he has, and we are gonna fold way too often. So basically, he's exploiting us, right? It's not, there's no way here to exploit him by betting very wide, because his reaction is so easy, right? He just floats very wide, and then he waits till we give up, and he bets, and he scoops the pot.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why we need to exploit him basically by playing a good base strategy. We need to like get him to a game tree he's not comfortable with, right? Because he's used to this thing that everyone bets flop and then gives up turn. We need to do something else. We need to already have a protected checking range on the flop, and then he will react to that in a way that is totally off. Probably he will probably step way too wide because he's used to people giving up when they check, and so that's when we bring him to a territory where we are comfortable and he is not comfortable. And that's why we need to play a base strategy that is a bit more fancy and a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to divide our range in these 4 parts. And I mean, the last one is easy, right? Check folding. We are just check folding our trashy hands. There's not much to say about here. But then check calling obviously needs already to be divided, because what are we check calling with? We are check calling with middling strength hands, right?
Yeah.
Don't want the pot to get too big, and we want to have at least some slow plays in our check calling range. And the check raising needs to have obviously value in it, and obviously some bluffs. And the betting range is the same, right? And some bluffs. Exactly. And so that's the point where it gets interesting, because now we basically need to build our range. And I mean, this would be fun if the Twitch chat also interacts a bit. Like we're funny to see if we can like fix if we can figure this out together, right?
Yeah. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to turn the light off behind me. Light on. Sorry. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. Brain functions activated.
Sorry, the sun's just going down over the houses in front of me, and I'm getting darker and darker in here. So I thought I'd better turn the light on before I just disappear. But yeah, guys in the chat, as Alex has just said here, give your thoughts here on what kind of hands you'd be looking to put into your ranges here for betting, check raising, check calling.
Yeah, like give us some hands and tell us where you would put them, right? Let's see if something happens.
I mean, I think the first thing to kind of mention with the check folding range, which is, I don't know, pretty clear, is your hands like if you've got a Queen Jack offsuit or something like that, where you don't really have much in terms of backdoor equity. Obviously, you've got the 2 overs, but
yeah, like except those are obviously like the first hand, like obviously there is even worse, right? There is even offsuit stuff that is even worse. Queen Jack is not like super bad. So I would maybe check call some like we could say we check call the Queen Jack that have a club in them, right?
Yeah,
because then we have the backdoor flush draw. What obviously we are check folding. Basically, we are check folding everything that doesn't have any kind of backdoor equity or whatever, right?
Yeah.
If we have a hand like I don't know,
like Ace-3 of hearts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like exactly like stuff like that. there are quite some hands here that like we could maybe visualize this. Wait a second, maybe then it is a bit easier. Yeah, so maybe, can you see this now? Can you see the solver now open or?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, perfect. So let's try, wait a second. I need to make space here. Yeah, basically put this here maybe. Okay, so yeah, so this basically more or less is our button opening range, right?
Yeah.
And so we can visualize it, and then it's not like we have to only do it in our brain. And yeah, so obviously there is a lot of trash here, right? Especially the offsuit hands, queen 9 off, jack 9 off, ace 3 off, ace deuce off. And obviously the hands that have 2 overcards, like ace 9 off, for example, gets more interesting, because obviously ace 9 off that has the 8 of clubs, we are always calling because we have the backdoor nut flush draw. So we won't fold out all of them, but there are definitely quite some hands here that we are folding out, or even hands like, I don't know, 2-3 suited, obviously, or 3-4 suited. Exactly. Like, is there coming some input from the chat, or?
Yeah, so 84 Poison said he thinks check raising kind of mid pairs plus and open enders.
Okay, so here in the check raising range, mid pairs plus, and like on this specific board, I mean, open enders obviously would be like, the problem here is that this is a bit complicated, right? We have a bet and a check raising range that is divided in value and bluffs. So what I actually do on these boards where I decide that I don't want to range bet, because there are some boards we can also range bet when we are out of position, like the very dry ones, like king 6 deuce or something like that. But obviously, so what I do to keep it more simple is I'm checking my entire range. So I'm not having a betting range at all here, and that makes it a bit easier because I only have the check raising range that has value and bluffs in it. So maybe do that for now to keep it simpler, right? We don't want to make it extra complicated. So let's say on a board like this, we decide this is too wet and too connected to range bet. So we decide to check our entire range, and then we obviously have this check raising range. And so 8-9, like an open ender, like 8-9 or something like that, is an awesome hand to check raise as a bluff, obviously. So we could put that here, make some space here, and say 8-9, 8-9 off and suited, whatever. Definitely an awesome hand to do that, obviously.
Or 4-5 for the other end. Great.
Yeah, definitely. We will only have the suited combos here. It's definitely an option. Exactly.
Strong flush draws. Ace X of clubs, King X of clubs.
Yeah, that's the funny part here. That's a concept that's also a bit misapplied in my opinions. Like the flush draw with the ace in it, like the ace high flush draws are often pretty strong as a check call, and that's because even if the guy starts hammering at us, we can check call flop, we can check call turn again with a flush draw, obviously, and then sometimes on the river he will give up, right, with his bluffs. And let's say he had a hand like 8-9 off, he will probably give up on the river if he doesn't hit his draw, and so then we win with our ace high, right? So that's why that's actually a good hand to check call, because with the ace it has some showdown value, right? So we could put like ace X of clubs here, right? Maybe like the ones that don't have 2 overcards, something like ace 4 suited, ace 3 suited, we could check raise them definitely. But the other ones I think are actually a bit too strong to check raise with, right? They are already in the showdown value category basically.
Obviously, if you've got ace like let's say ace 10 or ace jack of clubs, you're not only drawing to the clubs, but you're drawing to the ace and the jack as well. So you've got a lot of equity there.
Exactly. That's why it's so nice check calling them, because we can comfortably check call any turn, right? And sometimes he has even weaker flush draws, right? And if the flush comes, obviously we stack him, and if it doesn't comes in, we win at showdown because we have the ace and he doesn't. We win with high card simply. Yeah. But yeah, obviously we have a lot of flush draws here, like we can check raise with, like let's call it flush draws without 2 overcards or something like that. We can obviously also check raise some of them of the ones with 2 overcards, but those are pretty, like also king queen suited or something. They are pretty strong check calls. And yeah, in the value category, I think the viewer before said something like middling pair or something like that. Like this would be obviously the 6 here. We can obviously check raise here a hand like because if we decide to check our entire range, we also have obviously pocket 8s, 9s, 10s, and whatever in there. So obviously we can raise here if we want 8s plus, right?
Yeah.
As a value check raise. Pocket aces actually are a pretty nice check calling hand. They are basically in the slow play category because they have they are not afraid of overcards, right?
Yeah.
So no turn card will be an overcard. So that's why pocket aces are generally a pretty nice slow playing hand. And yeah, pocket 8 plus without aces is pretty obvious value check raise. And then obviously we can also check raise some sixes, like similar like in the spot before where we were in the big blind, right? We are again out of position. And so we have this check raising strategy. And so we can check raise ace X, A6, basically, because we are ahead of a lot of his 6x. And we can check raise a hand like 6-8 suited, for example, because we have the additional backdoor straight draw, and maybe even a backdoor flush draw or something like that.
Yeah. And also you're blocking the 8-9s that they're gonna be more likely to call with as well.
Yes, and we are even blocking their 7-8, right?
And that as well.
Yeah, definitely, totally right. Yeah, and obviously nice slow plays in general are hands that are like blocking his value range a lot, right? Because like we don't want to slow play too much, but it is nice actually to slow play here, for example, with a hand like a7, right? Because that means he doesn't, like on this board, maybe because of the flush draw, we should be like not so inclined to do slow play it, but maybe like say a7 off with the ace of clubs, for example. We could just slow play it because we block his very strong combos of 7x. His most frequent combo will be a7 off, obviously, and we are blocking that.
Yeah.
So we can just just check call and let him bluff because it is more likely he has only a bluff when he bets because we block his value so heavily. And yeah.
Then obviously boats as well, I'd assume.
Yeah,
like pocket sixes.
Yeah, but like pocket sixes is a pretty nice slow playing combo, obviously. Like pocket sevens, obviously, if you have quads, we slow play that one. Pocket sixes, we can definitely check raise it sometimes because we unblock his sevens and we want to cooler him when he has sevens. We want to ensure that all the money goes in, right? Grow the pot right away. And yeah, like in our scenario, for example, king 6 suited, this would a typical hand that I would say is a middling strength hand here. So I would just check call it. But if we have like the king 6 of spades here, we can decide to check raise it, for example, right? Because we have pair and backdoor equity, So that's always the things that should go through your mind a bit in these spots. And that's how you will ensure to not get exploited in an easy way, right? You have to have a somewhat decent base strategy here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just a quick question from the chat,
Mm-hmm.
asking about hands like ace x of spades.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you could maybe put that into the check raising for bluffs. Got ace x of spades, 2 overs.
Yeah, definitely. Like those hands, I think, are fine for both ranges, for the bluffs and for the check calling, because they have 2 overcards and the backdoor flush draw. They are pretty strong. So ace x of spades, I would definitely raise all the ones up to the 6, right? Ace deuce, ace 3, ace 4, ace 5.
Yeah.
They are an awesome bluff because they don't have additional equity. Like they are quite strong, but not super strong. And then the ace 8, ace 9, ace 10, and so on. We could mix them or something like that. We could go either way. Or we could say, for example, okay, ace 8, ace 9, ace 10 suited, or maybe also ace jack suited, I check raise, and ace queen and ace king starts to be strong enough to just check call, right?
Yeah.
So that's what could maybe be our strategy.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I mean that's it's one of these things, isn't it? It's when you break it down like this, and you literally just break it down to the different kind of sections of hands of like, you know, my flushes with my 2 overs, my flushes without 2 overs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it all just becomes a lot clearer, I think, to then implement in game. Obviously, because that's the whole point. That's what we're all here for, isn't it? Is to be able to do this in game, and not when we've got the luxury of an hour and a half with a solver to sit down and look at it.
Exactly.
So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially the way you were kind of saying earlier in terms of the difference between this kind of flop and the one we were looking at earlier, where this flop isn't necessarily one where we just want to, you know, c-bet 100% range or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's still hands that, you know, theoretically we could c-bet here, but I do like the idea of checking kind of where we've ended up, which is checking range and then either check folding, check calling, or check raising. Because to my eyes, anyway, I like the way that kind of plays out, in that your opponent always knows you're going to check, but they don't necessarily know what you're going to do straight after. Whereas when you bet, it's maybe a little bit easier to kind of get out of the way, let's say.
Yeah, like definitely. But when we check our entire range here, our opponent is gonna make so many mistakes, right? Because he's not used to this. He's used to players that have a very weak checking range, and so he will start to hammer at us with very bad bluffs and with hands that have like showdown value, but are in a very bad spot when they get re-raised. So basically, playing a solid strategy here. Like again, like this is pretty balanced, and this is something the solver would probably do, but this is actually the way we are going to exploit him here, right? Because he will make so many mistakes against this, and we will put him in so many spots where he has no idea what to do, right? If he steps to white here and steps a hand like, I don't know, let's say he calls with 6-5 off, and then he immediately, like, I mean, 6-5 off, he could step, but let's say I don't know, like let's say he always steps here with pocket fours or something like that, and then we check raise him a lot. I think he doesn't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
Calling feels kind of bad because the hand at the end of the day sucks, and pretty every turn card is bad. Folding feels a bit nitty, and then these are the spots like when he's like at this point of indecision where he will make a lot of mistakes.
I think that's the thing that people forget about solvers, isn't it? It's just because it's a solver and it's GTO doesn't mean it's not exploitative. I think
absolutely.
I think that's where people get mixed up sometimes. Sometimes doing the GTO unexploitable play is actually exploiting certain people.
Basically, yeah, definitely. So everywhere where it is easy to simplify and to use to exploit a bit, that's totally fine. I would always do this, but especially in these out of position spots that are hard to play, it is usually the most like playing a solid strategy that no one is playing at these stakes is already basically super exploiting the population, right?
Yeah.
Because no one is basically doing this. And yeah, and I like to keep things simple. I like to have only one starting action always on the flop, so I don't like to split my range right away. So that's why I like checking my entire range here. That way I keep it like this. I keep it a bit easier. But obviously you could also polarize here and say, okay, some hands I bet. The important thing here is that you check a lot, right?
Yeah.
The rest is up to you, but you need to check a lot here. You definitely you can't range bet here. That's killing your win rate basically. And obviously this is not easy. This is something you have to do off the tables, and takes quite a bit of time. And like if you just jump into a game right now and then you say, okay, I've seen this now, let's apply this, it's going to be pretty hard. Because it's hard to visualize your whole range, right? So that's why it's cool to sit down and say, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? But at least write down some of these hands and say, okay, with this hand category, I'm going to do this, and with that hand category, I'm going to do that, and so on.
Yeah, it's good. This is one of the most informative hour and a halves I think I've ever had in terms of poker. It's one of those things, isn't it? It's completely different when you're trying to review your game on your own, as people have seen me do week on week here, where you're looking at the spots yourself and you're kind of going, oh well, I think maybe I played that wrong, or maybe I played that right, and maybe I should have done this or whatever that. But it's very different when you've got someone like yourself who's obviously already made those few extra steps up the ladder, that has already done kind of this hard work and can kind of point someone like me in the right direction to say, actually maybe look at this, maybe look at your check raising range more often, try and find these kind of spots to get you to that next step kind of thing. So like, thank you for doing this, obviously. I think we'll call
for me, man. You're welcome. Everyone welcome.
But yeah, like it's I think we'll call it a day, more or less there. We've been going for about an hour and a half, which I think we said before we would try and keep it as kind of concise and to the point as we could. So yeah, I think we'll call it a day there.
Yeah.
Maybe do this again in future, hopefully.
Yeah, that would be nice, definitely. It was quite a bit of fun.
And yeah, interesting if we see that I've started check raising 100% of flops or so. You just see my red line go straight up and my blue line just go straight down.
Yeah, hopefully the chat is not overwhelmed by this stuff, right? Because obviously this is a little bit advanced. It is a bit easier if you just say, look at some hands and say, do this here and do this there.
Yeah.
And that's probably the thing that gets more immediate results, right? Like what I'm a bit afraid here is that some guys like start to apply this right away, or like try this a bit and then it doesn't work, and they say, well, this is useless stuff because this is balanced play and whatever.
Yeah.
This just takes some time. Like you can't expect to succeed at poker by just sitting down and play. But like I got to 50 Zoom. I'm far from a genius player or something like that. I got there by simply sitting down and doing this stuff. And honestly, these days the games are pretty tough, especially if you play Zoom and whatever. And I think there is no way out of NL10 and NL25 and so on, by just saying, okay, with this hand I do this now, and with this hand I do that. And that's more or less my strategy. Like, unfortunately, you have to sit down and study a bit. But I think for those who are willing to do that, this could be somewhat useful, hopefully. Yeah.
Yes, that's great. And just to recap as well, what we were talking about earlier in terms of my leaks, and if it's helpful for anyone, I've got it on the screen there. I've just made a couple of notes. Obviously, I'm going to go back and watch this again and to make some proper notes. I highly recommend everyone else do that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll be putting the video up on my YouTube channel within the next couple of days. So if you haven't already, go over there, guys, and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can see when this video goes up, and we can, and you know, myself and you and all of you can all watch it again and benefit from Alex's knowledge. But yeah, the takeaways that I've got from this, obviously, but you know, before we got into all this just now, is, you know, kind of play a bit more 3-bet or fold strategy, especially you know, when facing raises when you're in position, things like that.
Yeah.
And then obviously off the back of that, study more 3-bet pots, and you know, how to navigate those post flop especially. Other takeaway for myself is essentially to defend more in the big blind, calling and raising against steals. The big one, which I think is the big takeaway today, is to check raise more on the flop, with the kind of ranges that we're talking about here, and obviously where we were talking, where we had the solver going on earlier. If I move that out of the way, for those ranges there that Alex has brought up, on, you know, a dry board like that where you check raising with any kind of equity you've got, either for protection or for value, or a hand that we can comfortably, you know, barrel if a good card comes. I've then got another takeaway for myself, which is I'm c-betting too often after raising for the small blind. Obviously, that the spot that we've just looked at here is perfect example of c-betting too often from the small blind, and sometimes checking ranges is a really good strategy there. And yeah, and then I've written again just more on the check raise on the flop. So trying to check raise more often on dry flops when you've got strong hands, weak hands that need protection, hands with good backdoors. You know, then c-bet a turn when you pick up equity, or if the card is garbage for your opponent's calling range. But yeah, that's my those are my notes that I've got. I'll be poring over vigorously those 5 points, and obviously the rest of the show. So Andy's just asked what the YouTube channel is. The YouTube channel is Big Shades TV, all one word. If you look at the bottom of the screen down there, I'll shift my mouse down to it just below here, where you see the scrolling message says follow for more content, and then it says Big Shades TV. So that's where the video and all of these kinds of sessions get uploaded. But also, if you look on the actual Twitch channel, you scroll down, there's links and stuff below so you can just click on it and it'll just take you there. And I think just to end the stream, Mumble Chum has just asked, I know it's fishy to ask, but what happened in the hand?
Let's have a look. I think
let's be results oriented. Obviously, I make the fishy play and I c-bet my range.
Yeah, and he raises. Right. That's exactly the problem I wanted to address here a bit. Like
yeah,
your objective with this hand is to keep the pot small, right? And that's why check, because you have no additional equity, and that's why check calling is a pretty good option. And by doing this, like the sizing is off, because this gives him even more how should we say, entices him even more to raise, right? The small sizing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, now he ensures to grow the pot, and that's what we didn't want to. And okay, we re-raise. I didn't select this one to show like bad play. This is totally random. I choose it only because the flop example was nice.
I do goofy stuff. Like there was a hand in the I think it was last week or the week before in the stream that I reviewed, where I just did the weirdest thing. I had it like ace 8 offsuit and didn't have anything, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna lead the flop and then check call the turn and then like check shove the river or something, and the guy had aces and I just got absolutely wrecked. But sometimes I just have these weird moments where I just self-destruct, and we found one. We found a self-destruct moment.
Let's see what happens, right? For the audience. Okay, obviously the flush comes in, that's bad. We check, he checks behind, and the king comes, and we check, and he checks behind, and wait a second, I have to put this on show hand results, and he had the flush draw. Yeah, this was a fine raise from him, definitely.
Yeah,
especially against the small sizing, he should go pretty aggro. I think if you put this into the solver and you give the aggressor the option to range bet, I think what the solver does is he starts raising like something like 70% of the time, or something like absolutely hilarious, because he has just an easy time to put pressure on you, right? And that's what he did. So his play is pretty fine. He could have bet again. I don't know why he checked it down afterward. I mean, okay, here it is clear he checks. Never mind. But on the turn, I would have definitely bet if I was in his
I'm
shoes, but
guessing maybe he was afraid that I had like a boat, like 7-6 or a7, pocket sixes. Maybe he thought I had a stronger flush draw. Maybe he just thought I wasn't so much as a fish to be leading and then 3-betting with king 6.
Right. I totally forgot you re-raised him, right? I forgot that. I totally forgot. Yeah, I totally fine play by him. I mean, now that I think about it, even if you wouldn't have check raised him, and I think it's a pretty fine check back actually. His play was fine, and if you re-raise, obviously his play is totally fine. He needs to be scared of boats and better flushes, basically. So totally
well played, player 2.
Yeah, player 2. Good job.
Nice one. Anyway, so we'll call it a day there.
Okay. By the way, if someone wants to contact me, I don't know, for I'm doing this a bit now, coaching and stuff, and in general, if someone wants help, I also create a small group. So feel free to contact me. Is the screen still on my Can they see the screen?
It is, yeah. I'll tell you what I'll do is you write it on your screen. I'll bring it up on mine a little bit bigger.
Okay. Because actually this is really small here. Whatever. This is my email. Exactly. Can you see that? Hopefully.
Yeah. So
maybe I can make it a bit bigger. Wait a second.
I've got it a little bit bigger on the screen here. I'll put it in the chat as well. Actually, here. So
okay, should be fine. Should be fine. Yeah, should be fine.
So yeah, guys, if any of you want to contact Alex about some coaching, you can get in touch with him on the email address I've just put in the chat. We'll cut that then, which is also by here on the screen. And if today's showing is anything to go by, I'm sure you'll get some really good value out of his coaching. So we'll knock it on the head there, and we will do this again in the future. Obviously, as we said earlier, go check out the coaching again on. Go check out the stream again on YouTube in a couple of days. Obviously, you can go there now and subscribe so you can see when it goes live, and then and then we'll pick this up again another time. to be determined. So yeah, thanks for coming out, guys. Thank you, Alex, as well. Really gonna help my game for sure. I'm sure it's not just going to be me as well. I'm sure everyone in the chat is going to have a lot to kind of go away and think about after this. And yeah, just thanks. Go get yourself a beer for a job well done.
I will. Was a lot of fun, man. Was glad to be here.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Was cool session.
Cool. And if anyone wants to come hang out with me again later this evening, I'm going to be streaming some Among Us, which every single person in the world seems to be streaming at the moment. But hey, we have fun, so catch you later, guys, and thanks for coming out. Ta-ra.